Hello and welcome back to the J&Z podcast. My name is Jace Van Ort,
And I'm Zeph Makla.
and today we're going to be jumping right into things, talking about the legendary Spider-Man 3. We're ending off the trilogy today, baby. So apparently, according to Zeth, this is one of the worst regarded superhero movies of all time. But I would like to make a case for it today. So Zeth, Mr. Negative, what makes this movie so big and bad?
Everything's all over the place with this movie. I understand it's not the director's fault. Some of it was forced by the studio with toy mandates and stuff. They wanted to get Venom into a movie when the director really had no idea how the character functioned at his core. But this movie's just way too busy, to be honest with you.
And I can totally see where you're coming from. It definitely has a aspect where there is way too much going on and we don't get to see enough of the villains. So in this movie, right, everything is going great for Peter. MJ has her semi-Broadway appearance and things are going well in that department. Things seem to be going great for him. But at the same time, there comes Harry finding his dad's Batcave, and I actually have an issue with this. So at the end of the last movie, right? Harry found the secret room hidden behind the mirror, right? And he's like kind of hallucinating his dad being there. It feels kind of like a cop out because it doesn't even make sense. He didn't have the serum in him. He didn't have anything. His dad just was like, "Oh, here, check behind this mirror," in some kind of hallucination. My problem is, and it could just be something stupid, but he goes behind the mirror and there's this room and it's perfectly outfitted. He has the Green Goblin outfit. He has all this stuff laid out. Problem is, maybe he just had multiples of his things, but I'm fairly confident they didn't just. Who put that stuff back and laid it out ever so nicely for Harry? Because Harry finds the room. He's got the glider in there. He's got all this other stuff in there. How did
Oh,
it
well
get there?
that was Norman, because remember, Norman didn't realize he was the one that was causing all the trouble in the first movie. He didn't
Yeah, but he also
realize.
died.
I know that, but it was his secret room from the very beginning. So it was secret from Norman. Like, even Norman didn't even realize that he had that room, because the goblin was the one who did it all.
Right, but my question is, why is it full of stuff when he died using all the stuff? Who put it back? Who laid it all out for Harry? Because Norman died, obviously, with the Green Goblin
Well,
in
I
him.
guess it's just one of those things where, Norman made a bunch of prototypes, or, he got all the prototypes from the company, or, he made duplicates and stuff in case, one mask didn't work out. I don't
And
know.
that would
That's
make
just
sense.
something you kind of like think about for a second, and then you just kind of brush aside.
Sure, I know. It's kind of like an inference. It just was very strange to me the way that was all laid out. But not a huge nitpick, just something I noticed.
Yeah.
Just a little confusing. Regardless, Harry finds that room, and I'm not. Are you still a fan of MJ in this movie?
Nope. She is annoying as ever.
Me neither. Although I will say later on in the movie, I kind of agree with her at some certain parts.
I understand what it's trying to be. Everything is going well for Peter in the beginning of this movie. So the movies, there's way too much going on, but
Way too
the
much.
story with her, at least, is like Peter is, he has all of his stuff that he's ever wanted in the world. Finally people are treating him good as Spider-Man. He's got the woman of his dreams. He's got a pretty decent job finally with Jameson, and he's making decent money with him. The problem with MJ is that while Peter is rising, she's lowering. Like, she's not doing good with her Broadway show. She gets fired and stuff. Um, and I guess what I don't like about her is that it just seems very selfish at times. And like I said, it's just there's so much going on in this movie that it kind of gets lost. But she's just very selfish in this movie and just really, really unlikable again.
I agree. And yeah, we're not gonna like name every single plot point. We're not gonna spell the movie out for you, but I do have to nitpick when the venom came from the sky just as a meteor. If you actually watch the meteor land, it's like the most unconvincing. It looks like it doesn't like the meteor land looked it felt like a parody of some cheesy space film when it landed. It was not convincing. There was no sound when it landed.
Well, it was
It,
probably meant to, kind of be a little like maybe a cheesy, monster flick from the 50s. Who knows? Maybe
well, they
that's what
sure
he was
didn't
going
tell
for.
me about it. I don't know about that.
So, other than Venom, though, I really like Sandman in this movie. He is, other than Dr. Octavius, he's my favorite of the trilogy.
I can see that. I can see that. It just at the same time he just seems so unconvincing. Like he doesn't
What do you
really
mean?
want to do anything.
That's exactly what his character is, though. At his core, like everything about him is for his daughter that is sick, I believe.
Yeah, she's got some unnamed disease and he's trying to cure her by resorting to crime.
Yeah, so there's something like it's not he's a villain, but he's a likable one.
The only thing keeping me from really calling him a great villain though is just how little a little screen time and effect he has on the movie. Like obviously he has a lot of effect on the movie, but he just gets so tossed up with everything else that everything feels half-hearted, including him.
Yeah, it's because they tried to incorporate so much. They tried to incorporate Harry Osborn as the new Goblin. They tried to do the Venom and the symbiote comic line in one movie, which is almost impossible in my opinion. And then you have Sandman. Yeah, he gets tossed aside.
So, speaking of the villains, you have been pretty adamant about not liking Harry throughout the whole thing. How do you think of him as Green Goblin? Because I personally don't mind it.
I absolutely hate him in this. His
Why?
costume is the dumbest thing that
That
has ever
doesn't.
been put to screen.
It may be, but that doesn't necessarily detract from the character. I thought
I know, but
I
it's
prefer
just
it
not
to
good.
Power Ranger Norman. You know.
Well, I prefer the Power Ranger suit over this. This is the surfer dude suit. It's stupid. And then when they're fighting, and I like the parts when they're fighting, and even though it's pretty poor, there's that time when Peter loses the ring, and then they have to come around, and he has to thwip for the ring again. I like that little part.
Oh, me
But
too. That was kind of fun.
other than that, like it's just atrocious.
I did notice, and I learned later that it got better, but the fights were not very good in the beginning. Not necessarily
No.
quality, but they spent all the like this. The fights look okay, and the CGI looks okay later on in the movie, but in the beginning they're very lackluster. Like with Sandman, I could it could just be
Really, you didn't
me
like the
getting used to
Sandman
it.
fights?
No, I did. I just they didn't look visually very convincing until the end of the movie. I think everything looked very blurry and almost like
Oh,
Spider-Man 1 levels.
I love the Sandman fights, especially when remember this is the same year that the MCU got started, 2008. There was a big time gap in between this and the second movie. And the one thing that really shows is a lot of the CGI improved over those 4 years. For instance, when Sandman first appears and it's him rising from the sand, and you have that part when I think he grabs for the ring or the locket of his daughter, and it's all like sand, and it just goes through his hand. That's some really really great CGI. And then also with the fights when Spider-Man, punches his fist through Sandman and it goes right through him, and then he tries to unbuckle his fist. That's really convincing. I really like it when there's another point
The
when
box fight wasn't so bad, but everything before that really didn't look very good.
I
I
don't think
feel.
the Harry stuff looked good, or when he's swinging, it doesn't look that great. but I do think everything with Sandman is 100% like A plus quality.
At least for the time.
I still think it holds up today really well, personally.
I really don't, not till the end of the movie. But I will say, if there was one good thing to come with that beginning Harry fight, it was when he clotheslined him off the glider. That was so funny. It was just
Yeah, and it's
awesome.
it's got that really weird like cartoon like thwip.
Yep. So if we got anything from that fight, it was that moment, and I did enjoy that moment quite a bit. How do you feel about Harry losing his memory? Do you think it was kind of forced, or do you think that it actually kind of helped out the plot a bit?
I think in the scheme of the movie, it really takes away from everything. But I think if they took Venom out of this movie, it would be fine. But because you have so much going on, you have to keep track with what's going on with MJ. You have to keep track of what's going on with Harry's delusional memory loss. You have to keep track of, Spider-Man and Peter Parker and his relationships with, Gwen Stacy coming up, and you have him acting like a total goofball when he has the Venom suit. And then you have Venom himself, and then you have Eddie Brock. I mean, it's there's so much stuff getting thrown at you. It's hard to keep track.
See, my thought on the Harry situation and him losing his memory was I was hoping that they would use that time to further focus on Venom and Sandman because it really opens up the plot because you don't have to worry about him for a good while there. But instead, they choose to focus on Peter's personal problems that I just could care less about, honestly. To a certain extent, they just don't interest me as much as getting to know the villains as much as you can know. Like they did an okay job fleshing out Sandman in the beginning, but then he's totally dropped for a large majority of the movie just for Peter to do whatever he wants to do. I do think though that the worst part of the movie is the whole Spider-Man kiss scene with Gwen Stacy. Like it
Yeah, why
feels
is
so forced. Why would he do that? Nobody, no rational person does that.
yeah, it's just like I said, I think it's just it gets lost in every single other thing. Like that's usually how this movie is. Like you're like, why did that person do it? And it's
Right, and they
because
never explain it. They never explain why
yeah,
he quit. He's like, "What's the big deal? What's the well? Like, of course it's a big deal. Like 90% of the movie happens with MJ and everything else because he did this, and they never explained why. Because it's a totally irrational thing to do, totally out of character, and it was just a really disappointing aspect of it. I feel I really hate that part because there's no point. It was just manufactured drama. I'm better off just watching like The Bachelor or something if I wanted manufactured drama like that.
yeah, the drama when it comes to the relationships is not good. I do like Gwen Stacy though. Like Gwen Stacy, her look, they've always nailed Gwen Stacy's look compared to the comics. Like I think Bryce Dallas Howard plays this Gwen Stacy, and she looks like the comic version. I mean, her hair looks a little fake, but it still looks exactly like the comics, that white blonde. And then later on when they do her in the Amazing Spider-Man, they I feel like they've always done her character as in terms of the looks justice.
Yeah, I had no problem with Gwen Stacy when she showed up, and I think that she provided a decent foil to MJ in that regard. I just can't stand how that actually came into being, though. It just was, that was just a stupid moment. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah,
It just felt like so unrealistic and unbelievable that you're like, okay, that's just done for the sake of you couldn't think
drama.
of any other way to do it. So
Yeah. It's a lot of writing mistakes in this movie that easy fixes, but they decided not to.
but you know who was the one saving grace of this movie and every other Spider-Man movie?
Eddie Brock?
J. Jonah Jameson. My absolute favorite character. He's so stinking funny, especially in this movie. Whenever he opens his mouth, it's just yeah, he's just such a goofball, you know? He's just hilarious and I think that it was the absolute perfect person to play him. And I'm glad
Oh
that
yeah.
they could not have picked a better actor. They could not have picked that they wrote him so well.
Yeah, he's become his like voice as J. Jonah Jameson is so iconic. Like anytime you hear somebody else try to play him,
It
it
doesn't
sounds
sound right.
really wrong. Yeah, it sounds wrong. That's
It's
why I'm
how when
so
I
glad
was
they brought him back
I
for Far From Home.
I could not think of a better way to a better person. It just sounds like when you read the comics. That's what you imagine him sounding like is his voice. And he looks just like him in the comics. So it's just so funny and he has such great dialogue always. Basically, I'm going to skip over a lot of the MJ Gwen Stacy stuff though. It's just so
No,
boring
no,
to
no. No,
watch.
no, no. The best part of the movie that had me fully entertained was the full frontal musical number when he has the Venom suit and
Okay,
he's with
that's
Gwen Stacy and he goes to the boom boom bar basically
oh brother this part.
and they're dancing and he just goes up to the piano and it's just a full like musical just starts happening.
Can you imagine if they pulled something like that today in a Marvel movie? It wouldn't even come up. But I'm just saying, right? If they had something like that in the middle of Black Widow, I think people would remember it more.
Definitely.
That's it. That's it. You want your movie to become a cult classic? Just have the serious protagonist just make an absolute fool out of himself for our enjoyment.
But when you're watching the movie fully, I was cringing so
I
hard
was laughing so
at those
much.
moments. I wasn't laughing. I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible."
I know, but even now you're laughing. Like, it's so bad, it's good. It's just so funny.
It's just it I seriously cannot believe like this was their idea of Venom. Like, yeah, we're going to have it instead of like the comics where he gets agitated and a little more angry easy. We're going to make him a total goofball and dork. Even more so. It's like it makes no sense because it's supposed to dial up like everything that Peter not is not. And in this movie, it dials up everything that Peter is.
Uh, I'd argue that he isn't quite the confident man that he was when he was with Venom. But man, I just love how they just throw his hair down. Like he just like scoots his hair down to his eyebrows and he's good to
Yeah,
go.
it
That's
makes
his
no sense. There's that
transformation.
scene when he goes in the back alley and he gets really mad and he looks in the mirror and he's just like,
Like it just was so good though. That was probably the but it'd be different if this was like a really good movie, but since you can't take it too seriously, it just makes it even better.
I guess. Like I said, it's funny to watch him in compilations, but when you're watching the movie as a whole, it's a whole nother ball game.
How do you feel about when they revealed or claimed at the time that it was Sandman that killed Uncle Ben? Obviously by the end of it, it turned out that he really didn't, but I hate to say it, but at the time of actually watching it, you're like that doesn't like why are you changing this? I felt it like it turned out that wasn't the one to kill him at the end of it, but it just seemed like they were changing things just to force conflict a little bit. And I know is that how that happens in the comics, Seth?
Not that I recall, at least in the classic series. And I think this was just one of their last ditch efforts of, tying the strings all together and trying to connect it in a way. But yeah, I didn't think that was really a good idea to begin with either.
Because it was just unbelievable. Because you either knew that if it was true, it was kind of a lame, like it wasn't lame, but it felt like a sellout. Like it
I think what they should have done is reverse the scene a little bit. So Sandman should have, like, if you honestly wanted to do something like tie it from the beginning and not make it feel forced, have it where Sandman is the guy from the first movie that steals the cash and Peter lets go. That way, when it's the flashback, reverse the scene where it's the guy that Peter kills in the first movie, or he accidentally kills, have it him be the one where he takes out Uncle Ben of the car, and then have Sandman accidentally bump him and him shoot him. So then he feels more at fault, because when you're bumped.
Yeah, it felt like they lied. It felt like they lied to us. Like they blatantly showed a flashback in which he just stood there and shot him. But you knew it wasn't true the entire time. Like I didn't know. It felt like they were like, who are you trying to fool? You literally said earlier in the movie that he claimed that that was a total mistake. He had nothing to do with it, but it wasn't him that did it. He made it pretty clear that that's how it went down. He agreed to everything else, but he would not admit to killing Uncle Ben. So you're like, okay, he probably didn't kill Uncle Ben. Why are you trying to convince us that he did?
Yeah, so that's that. If I would have done that scene, I just would have reversed the roles a little bit, so that way Sandman is kind of a person that you recognize from the first movie in a way, but at the same time, have it play out the same where the guy dies accidentally, the Spider-Man's fault, but when he drops Uncle Ben, have him get in the getaway car, and then Sandman, since he bumped his friend on accident, he's more of sorry of the death. You know what I mean? It.
Right. Well,
I'm with you. It's very shoehorned into the story, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense of
make him
why.
at least be partially responsible. Make it more morally ambiguous instead of just him straight up not doing it and being there to take all the blame for it. It just totally kind of threw away what we had in the first one for a good portion of the movie for what felt like a very unconvincing lie.
Yeah, and it would have made a little more sense, because then um, him showing him actually stealing the cash and him running for his life makes the impact of what he wants to do for his daughter all the more so.
Right. It makes him. It would have just been so much better if they had ended up doing it that way, but they didn't. So there's that.
No. What'd you think of Venom at the end?
Venom at the end was kind
Like
of
when they
fun.
when they finally showed off what Venom is.
It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it's not quite there. It was kind of silly, especially how they beat him.
Well, how they beat him is fine enough, but I will never forgive them for that voice. The Venom voice is terrible in this. It's not like, in the when you think of Venom, especially from the comics, you think of, a deep growly
Right.
voice,
It's just
or
like
maybe something like Hulk, but he's a little more intelligent than Hulk. So that's why I like the 2018 Venom voice. He's like, Eddie, let's eat this chicken. Not, you want the spider, I want the spider, we all want the spider, let's go kill him. Like, that's how he sounds in this
yeah,
one. It's
I totally
stupid.
agree. I did think that they did a good job. Now that we're kind of at the end of the movie, we're skipping all the stuff with Harry and MJ. Harry basically puts MJ up to it, to break up with him. They make omelets. It's a great time.
Bro, that omelet scene,
It looked
that
like a good
was
omelet.
terrible.
No, it felt uncomfortable. I don't know why.
It did, especially when they started doing the twist and
Oh
stuff. I'm
god,
like,
it was the twist
why
that
is
really
this in this?
oh, it made me
And then
feel
she
less
kisses
guilty.
Harry.
Yeah, I know. It made me feel less guilty about Peter. Like you should make Peter feel bad for that. Why did you have to throw it? Why did you have to make MJ look bad too? Like she could have easily done nothing wrong this whole movie and just straight up been manipulated by Harry. I think would have been better. Like you know what I'm saying? She could have they could have done exactly the same thing, but you didn't have to make MJ as unfaithful in a sense as Peter was. It just didn't make sense to do that. But
Yeah.
instead, they made everything real confusing with it and nothing really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think definitely with the whole Harry thing, I think what they should have done is not given him the goblin suits and made him the new goblin, quote unquote, and not given him the memory loss. Because I think what would be really interesting for him to do is slowly destroy Peter's life.
That would be interesting instead of just cramp like they technically did that, but it was all just jam packed into the very end of it. Like
Yeah,
it happened so fast that you barely even remember it.
I think there's definitely a good movie hidden in this movie. It's just there's so much other stuff that's going on. I think if you eliminated everything with Venom, eliminate the new goblin stuff and when Harry gets amnesia, right? Amnesia.
Right, right.
Um change around some stuff with Sandman, and I think you have a really compelling Spider-Man story because not only do you have a Spider-Man story with a villain for Spider-Man with Sandman that is a really good villain like Octopus, but you have also a villain for Peter with Harry because with Harry what I would have done is more so since he knows he's Spider-Man. Why not use that as the opportunity to go to like J. Jonah Jameson or something like that with proof? Or start spreading lies and stuff and then slowly destroy his life. Maybe take MJ since MJ is obviously, really upset, make MJ fall for Harry again. You know
Right,
what I'm
right.
saying?
They
Like
could have
make Harry a villain for Peter.
they made her so ambiguous. They could have either had her be on his side, on Harry's side, or be on Peter's side. But instead, it's this weird area where she's not on Peter's side for sure, but she was totally on Harry's side until he for like she was already on his side, but now he's making her do all this other stuff, and so now she's just it was a whole mess.
Yeah, and then instead of having it where the big fight is a Spider-Man battle, have it where it's a Peter Parker battle. Have it like a Rocky 5 moment where instead of it's like in a big ring, have it where it's kind of at his home and um it's a little more of a grounded fight.
Sure, sure. But before I talk about the fight, I just kind of want to wrap up everything with Harry. And the one thing I really didn't like about him was that it was very flip floppy throughout the movie. So at one minute he loves Peter, he got his memory lost, but then he hates him, but then he hates him again, and then all of a sudden, especially in like Harry versus Peter again when it's in his apartment. First of all, it was an okay fight, but what the grenade
You didn't see like the chunks missing out of his face?
it just looked like Emperor Palpatine on half, and that was about it. Like nothing too like it was bad, but it wasn't crazy. Like any other person in the movie would have been blown up. Remember in the beginning, like in the first movie, he threw the grenades or shot something at him, and everybody just turned into skeletons real quick. Like that's what I
Well,
expected to happen.
that might have been a different grenade, but no, I get what you're saying.
It was shockingly ineffective. But the point is, the first thing that Harry does afterwards is first say no, but then just forgive him immediately. Your friend killed your dad and then blew up your face, and he didn't begrudgingly help Peter, I don't think, or it didn't feel like it. He just was like, okay, we're friends now.
Yeah, I
It
get what you're
was
saying. It's way
very
too back and forth
weird.
like MJ.
And I do have to say, if they did something right, I think they built up good tension with Peter and the final fight. Like, you got the impression that Peter couldn't beat him.
I guess.
It was building up to it. He asked Harry for help. He just wouldn't do it. And so he went to go fight all these things alone. The Sandman, Green, kind of Green Goblin, and all this other stuff, and Venom. And he got absolutely destroyed. He tried his best, but he just couldn't do it.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to disagree with you, buddy. With that, I really think that this ending is just not good. Not
I don't
I didn't
have
enjoy it at
that
all.
much of a problem with the final fight. I think if Harry wasn't so wishy washy the entire movie and so one side or the other, it could have been better. But when he did show up to help him, if he was less friendly towards Peter, I feel it would have made things a little better. But I don't know. There were some fun parts. Like I like especially when Harry's fighting Sandman briefly and he throws his jet like at him and it turns to glass because it got so hot. Like that was kind of cool, not going to lie. They did some fun stuff in that fight.
The thing I remember from that fight that I noticed it was really small was the one thing they did get right about Venom, and that's his web shooters. Because since he was from Spider-Man, he has some of his abilities that he copied, but he doesn't have physical web shooters or natural web shooters. But the one thing they did right was they have it where his web shooters come out at the top of his hand, like in the comics.
Mm.
And so that's just like the one thing I noticed that they got right. That and his webs were a little less Spider-Man-y, and they were more like the alien goo.
Gooey, yeah. One thing I didn't like about the fight, and it wasn't even the fight, it was beforehand, was Sandman and Venom. Because Sandman earlier was so adamant, I did not kill that man. I didn't do anything. That regard, I was just things went wrong. I didn't do it. Venom just pulls up and he's like, "Hey, you want to kill Spider-Man?" Sure. Like that's literally the conversation that they had. That was the entire thing. He didn't have any problem killing Spider-Man, even though it really wouldn't help him at that point. Like he could just leave. Spider-Man wasn't actively hunting him anymore. And he's just like, "Yeah, sure, I'll kill Spider-Man, whatever." He just joined along. Like that totally goes against everything that he stood for so far. He was so adamant he didn't kill this random person, but he's like, "Yeah, I'll kill Spider-Man." That
you
just was
know,
so out of character for me.
no, it's because you're forgetting Flint Marco wanted to be left alone. He had the cash, but when Spider-Man had the black suit, he had that one really good train fight.
I remember where he almost got hit by the bus and it was really funny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they get hit a bunch of times, and that's when Spider-Man lifts up the water and kills him, quote unquote. So that's why he wants revenge on that part. Remember, at this point, uh, he
It
didn't
just
tell
wouldn't make
Peter.
sense. He wants to be left alone. Peter thinks that he's dead. He can just live his life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess. Yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying.
It was a
I agree with
perfect
that.
opportunity, but he had absolutely no problem just showing right back up. He wasn't going to do anything else. Peter got over it.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah, I
they
agree
could
with
argue
you.
that he wanted to keep his family out, but making yourself into a master criminal at such a large stage really it just was a dumb decision all around. But with all of this together, I still kind of like the movie. I like wearing it. I like when he's super cringy, emo Parker, and the dance number. It was so ridiculous, but it was so funny at the same time. If you're not taking this one too seriously, you can kind of laugh at the cringe. Everything doing the twist, all that stuff. It wasn't awful. It just was not as good as the other ones or most other superhero movies. But there's still enjoyment to be had, I feel, if you go into it with the right attitude.
This is, in my opinion, it's one of those movies that's hidden in the editing. I really, really, truly feel that there is a good hidden movie in here. It just needs to be edited back heavily. And I think that there's some fan edits out there that would really do a good job of it. There's so much in this movie that it does so wrong with Venom, with Harry, with the relationships with, Gwen Stacy and
Anytime
Mary
MJ
Jane.
sang.
That's
Nobody enjoyed that. I have to say, not every single person that watched the movie was waiting for her to stop. Just stop singing, MJ. I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense.
I just I thought that the first half was okay, but right when Peter gets the black suit, it almost comes to a screeching halt for me.
Yeah, then it's just
So
marriage and Aunt May and all this boring stuff that goes on.
yeah, it just there's just some scenes that go on way too long, and like I said, there's the memes, but like I said before, if you're it's almost a totally different story when you're watching it in a compilation as compared to watching it with the movie. It's got a totally different tone.
I don't even
Cuz
know what the tone is. It's both
because like I
trying to be
said,
serious and funny, but not.
you have a super serious scene like you have Peter, he throws Eddie Brock to a thing. He's like, "You want forgiveness? Get religion," you know.
Oh yeah. My favorite part when it's definitely not cringe. What was it? Eddie Brock asking the Lord to kill Peter Parker. Like, what on earth was that? Why
Well, like
is
that's
that
what I'm
there?
saying.
It
You
was
have something
so bad.
super serious like that, like a super serious scene like that, and then the next scene is Peter Parker dancing down the street. There's no sense or order to this movie almost.
I just, I'm just saying, not to go back to it, but when he asked the Lord to kill Peter Parker, they treated it like it was this serious thing, but you're like, what on earth is he talking about? Like, what is this? Like, they treated it so seriously, and then all of a sudden, Peter's up at the top of the thing, just banging around with the Venom thing, and it was just awful dialogue. Like, no one says that.
Yeah, just overall, like I said, I think there's a good hidden movie in here. There's just way too much going on, and there's been the plenty of videos going on about how this could be fixed, but like I said before, the way I would fix it, um, and then it's just a very good movie at first in the first half, but then right when it comes to the black suit, it just comes to a screeching halt. So for that, I mean, this is probably my least favorite Spider-Man movie because of it.
I can understand that. I and that may or may not change when we get to the Amazing Spider-Man, which we'll be doing next. But I will say so far, I do think that Tobey Maguire is probably going to end up being my favorite Spider-Man.
Really?
There's just something about him that I can't really explain, but it, the way he acts, the way he talks, it's just a fun person to watch. And yeah, I don't know exactly what to say about it, but
I think he's a good Peter Parker. I just don't think he's a good Spider-Man.
honestly, I couldn't. Sometimes I feel the opposite. I know everybody says that, like it's the most, and everybody says the whole thing, but even in this movie, I don't think he was that great of a Peter Parker because he was just so weird. Like Peter Parker, and I'm not saying Toby, but just Peter Parker in the movie was just so weird. But I guess that really doesn't detract from him. But I'm losing my. And anyway, do you have a personal favorite up till now?
Of what have
Spider Man.
reviewed, or of the trilogy.
No, favorite Spider Man. I know
Favorite
it's a bit early to
Spider-Man.
call. Do you have a
Oh,
favorite? Yeah.
Andrew Garfield by far.
Really? I'll have to see why.
I know, yeah, I know a lot of people give him flack, but I really, really cannot wait to talk about him because he is just, in my opinion, he is one of the best. It goes for me with Andrew Garfield, then Tom Holland, and then Tobey Maguire. I love them all just as much as the other, but if I had to choose like who I wanted like to keep going, I would want Andrew Garfield and then Tom Holland and then Tobey.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that, but I'm going to save them for when we can talk about all three in a meaningful way, you know. But I think we've covered everything on this podcast, maybe even a little too extensively, to be honest.
We have covered nearly an hour of this. We have a lot to say about this one.
Yeah, I kind of was figuring this one would go about this way, but you know what? I'm not complaining. We had a fun conversation, so just to wrap things up, thanks again for watching. If you want, you can leave a like, comment, and let us know if there's any other series or videos you want us to make. And yeah, thanks again for watching. Have a great rest of your day.
See you guys.